是会被看见。台北金标为电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金标为电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金标为电影展征件开始。好事会被看见。台北金标为电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金标为电影展征件开始。好事会被看见。台北金标为电影展征件开始。 好事会被看见。台北金雕微电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金雕微电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金雕微电影展征件开始。好事会被看见。台北金雕微电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金雕微电影展征件开始。做好事会被看见。台北金雕微电影展征件开始。
So, hello everyone. Good morning and most welcome to our sessions. This is a very interesting sessions. We will talk a lot and discuss about how inclusiveness and diversity affecting our life. Inclusiveness, equality, and equity are not just issues for developing countries. Through marginalizations and vulnerability take different forms in different countries, and also different groups are left behind in different contexts. The presence of these groups and individuals is universal and constant. So today we have 4 outstanding speakers with different backgrounds, and they are really want to share what's happening and how their efforts in support inclusiveness and diversity according to different countries. For the first sessions, I would like to call Verna. She is the regional head of China Regional Hub from the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI. She would like to share how GRI put a lot of agenda, of course, with a lot of indicators and guidance, how to inform how the company put the inclusiveness and diversity into their sustainability report. And after that, Ben Carpenter, from the Chief Executive of Social Value International, United Kingdom, would like to also share how the social value need to be created in every activities, not in the form of the corporates, but also in our daily activities. How we help the people, how we connect the people, and how the value are created. So after these 2 distinguished speakers, we will go to the practical way, how these 2 guys from Singapore and also from India would like to share their expertise and also their experiences. Mr. Rajesh Chhabara from the CSRworks, he is a managing director. He do a lot of things to promote gender diversity, and one of them are Asia's top sustainability superwoman. After that, Anirban Ghosh from India. He is a chief sustainability officer at the Mahindra Group. Mahindra Group is a big industrial company in India. Would like to share how this company put a very constant diversity in India. So let's start.
Good day, everyone. My name is Verna and I'm representing GRI in Greater China Regional Hub. We'd like to thank the organizer for inviting us in this panel. And it's a shame we wouldn't be able to attend the Global Corporate Sustainability Forum in person this year. And I certainly hope that the international borders will be open and the restrictions will be lifted soon. So the session is about inclusiveness, and I will start with a brief overview of inclusiveness and sustainability disclosure. Then we'll talk about an interesting discussion about socially inclusive decarbonization. That is how we put S into climate conversations. And then we'll move on to human rights, that which is basically intertwined with inclusiveness. So here I summarized the relevant GRI standards as well as SDGs that center around equality, inclusiveness, and diversity. So, for instance, the GRI 405 that addresses the topic of an organization's approach to diversity and equal opportunity at work. Then GRI 406 further defines the term discrimination, and that include not only employees but also include customers or other stakeholders like suppliers or business partners. Then we have this GRI 402. So basically the international standard that establish the expectations of responsible conduct for organizations with respect to human rights. It's the UN guiding principle on business and human rights. So an organization could have impact on human rights directly or indirectly. Directly, basically, it's through its own operations, and indirectly, through its interactions and relationships with, for instance, with governments, with local communities, and with suppliers, or through its investments, right? Then we have these 17 SDGs. Like there's all the 17 SDGs, but here you can see there are 6 of them that are specifically and loudly highlighting inclusiveness. So you see how they apply inclusiveness from top to down in education, and then in the individuals there's gender equality, and then there's this employments, countries, cities, and the societies. So particularly SDG 8 echoes my peer panelists, like their points today that you would also hear about. And then there is SDG 11, which the background information of this is half of humanity, that it's about 3.5 billion people currently living in cities today, and then 5 billion people are projected to live in cities by 2030. So that means the world's cities, which occupy only 3% of Earth land, would account for 60 to 80% of energy consumption, and then 75% of carbon emissions. That's a lot. And so that this setting of the goals, which by 2030, we wanted to enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for integrated human settlement planning. And then by 2020, which is actually this year, we wish to substantially increase the number of cities and human settlements, adopting and implementing integrated policies and plans toward, here's the key point, toward inclusion, resource efficiency, mitigation, and adaptation to climate change. So-called adaptation to climate change, that means transition to post-carbon economy, which is my next slide. So basically, when I was pondering this topic, my email box has this message from my colleagues. They were having this discussion, which fit right into the topic today. So I thought it's a good idea to share with you all. And they obviously totally resonate what I just mentioned of SDG 11. So when we talk about climate change, we normally look at environmental elements. But if we're gonna, have the discussion about how we transition to post-carbon economy, we have to really put the social dimension into this dialogue, right? So this summary is actually based on the publication that was just recently released by COP26 Universities Network. So the 26th of UN Climate Change Conference was postponed because of the pandemic, and it will be taking place in Glasgow, Scotland next year. So the UK government will host this conference, and then there's 40 universities in the UK formed a network. And so basically, while we are putting our trust in policymakers, the public sectors, to find a solution, there's also this group of people who represent a strong voice to raise the concerns and propose an integrated approach. And so the backdrop of so-called just transition is basically we are already having this deepening social divergence, and it's obviously even more so when the pandemic hit us unexpectedly in early this year. So when we are transitioned into post-carbon era, the underlying question is, how can social goals be reached in tandem with climate goals and economic motivations? So how do we make it green, sustainable, and socially inclusive? As like EU's proposed Green Deal, how do we leave no one behind? And so a whole system approach was introduced. So the bottom line is, we could not ignore those vulnerable groups of people that would most likely be sacrificed during this transition. We kind of don't want to have these winners or losers choices, but instead, how do we recognize synergies and trade-offs across issues and sectors? And then how do we identify integrated solutions that would balance out environmental and socio-economic concerns? So this is actually a pretty much introductory piece of this subject. So those who are interested, you may dive deeper. Then, in the interest of time, we're gonna move on to the last slides, which is about human rights elements. The two terms, inclusiveness and human rights, of course, interconnected. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to talk a little bit about human rights elements that, in the GRI Universal Standards Exposure Draft. So I'm sure most of you are aware of this exposure draft. The public comment period was ended in September 2020. And so this basically, we also had regional workshops all around the world, including the one in Taipei in August, and we collected feedback and comments from all stakeholders and reporters. And now it's all the feedbacks are taken into consideration by our standards division, and which we hope we will have the revisions concluded by first or second quarter next year. So one of the major changes will be the strong emphasis of human rights that included some embedded mandatory human rights related disclosures. They include new disclosures and policy commitments regarding, in accordance with OECD's responsible business conduct. And then there are 4 key concepts being introduced, which is totally not new, but there's some key changes, like the term impacts. Now it goes like, so the definition of impact goes like the effect of an organization has or could have on the economy, environment, or people. So the key changes would be we replaced society with people, including on human rights. And then the material topic, it's the topic that reflects the organization's most significant impacts on the economy, environment, and people, including impacts on human rights. So of course, this is an exposure draft, and the final decision of the changes have not yet been reached. But I wanted to point out and highlight this element here, so we would have this in mind when we continue our sustainability journey. So you could also see, like PRI, they also proposed a 6-step frameworks to implement respect for human rights into investment activities. They also have this consultation ended in September this year as well. Then EU's mandatory due diligence to promote business respect for human rights and environment. You could see how all this is, in sync basically. So this is my presentation about inclusiveness in this session. And thank you all for your listening, and I look forward to meeting you offline, hopefully in the near future. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ben Carpenter. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Social Value International. And it's a great pleasure to be part of your event today at the Global Corporate Sustainability Forum. Thank you for the opportunity for me to contribute and speak about the topic of inclusiveness. So I'll be talking about inclusiveness today and what that means to Social Value International. I'll start with my first slide on our mission. Our mission is to change the way the world accounts for value. We believe that value needs to be redefined. The definition needs to be broader than just financial value. For many years, we have been accounting for financial value, and financial accounting has evolved over centuries. So we have a recognized way of accounting for financial value. But for the 21st century, we now need to broaden that definition so that social and environmental value are also accounted for. And if we do this, we're able to change the way we make decisions. We'll be able to reduce inequality, environmental harm, and improve our well-being. So that's what we aim to do. And Social Value International does this through a principles-based approach for accounting for value. I'll be talking about our principles in a moment because that is so key to the topic of inclusiveness. We develop a practice around these principles and a community of people that are developing it. You may also recognize the image in the corner, which is, of course, Taipei, because 12 months ago, we had a fantastic conference with our network, Social Value Taiwan, called Going Mainstream. So if you're interested in social value, do get in touch with Social Value Taiwan. They are one national network amongst 26 networks that we have operating across the world. This is a topic that is relevant for you as sustainability professionals, but also people working in government, people working in civil society. Our networks are diverse. The next slide I want to introduce to you has the principles of social value on it. These are the cornerstones, the foundations of all of our work. There are 7 principles, and these are the principles that need to be applied as a framework to help you account for value. So we don't have set metrics or indicators. It's a principles-based approach which allows you to be proportionate to your organization and apply these principles well. And if you do apply these principles, on my next slide, it shows you that these principles provide a framework for accountability to your stakeholders and also a framework for innovation. because if you want to be accountable for your stakeholders, then you need to be innovating relentlessly to provide as much value as you can. So really, we say that accountability and innovation are two sides of the same coin. Now, I'd like to talk about 3 of the principles, not all 7, we don't have time, but starting with principle number 1, involve stakeholders, because this really speaks to the topic of inclusiveness. This principle is about amplifying voices and creating dialogue with people. People experience impact, changes in their life, their well-being, and it's important that we give them more of a voice, more of an opportunity to hear their stories. Because if we truly want to be accountable and manage what's important, we need to be creating these dialogues and listening to people and hearing their stories and hearing exactly what it is that's important to them. So involving stakeholders is very much at the heart of Social Value International's approach. It's particularly about giving an opportunity for people who have very little power, because it's those people, those groups that have very little power are often the ones that experience the most impact. And so trying to address that power imbalance is so important if we are to truly measure and manage our impact. So moving on to my next slide and principle number 2, this is called understand what changes. Because if we want to understand social value, it is different to financial value. It is not obvious. Sometimes you need to explore it and you need to really examine what are the changes that are happening. This means talking to people and understanding what are the changes that happen in people's lives that impact them. Some of those changes will be positive. Some of those changes will be negative. Some of those changes will be intended and some will be unintended. And this principle is about recognizing all of those changes. You may be familiar with this chain: inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And it's the outcomes and impacts which is really important for us to understand. That's what really changes in people's lives. ESG is a growing movement, environmental, social, and governance issues. When we see a lot of ESG measurement, it tends to be focusing on the activities or outputs of a business. What we're calling for is for businesses to go further and measure not just the outputs or the activities, but what is it that actually changes the outcomes and the impacts in people's lives. And combining this principle with the first principle of involving stakeholders is critical, because it is through speaking and being inclusive with your stakeholders that you truly understand the picture of what is changing. My next slide is about principle number 3, value what matters. And valuing and valuation is also key to Social Value International's approach. We need to understand what changes matter most. What is it that people value in their life, have the most worth, place the most importance on? Again, inclusivity is part of this, because it is only through being inclusive and understanding what is really most important to other people that we can truly manage value and make decisions to optimize value. So I'm moving on to my next slide, and just to reiterate the point that it is really time to listen. This slide shows an image of political protests in Hong Kong, civil rights campaigners across the world uniting for the Black Lives Matter movement. These are all signs that as a society, we are not listening, we are not being inclusive enough. So 2020 is a year that we will all remember. It is one for the history books. COVID-19 is making us further apart digitally. Although digitally we can connect, physically we are distancing. It is harder and harder to bring people together. In this society, we are losing the ability to communicate and talk to each other as equals. And that is a big threat. So I think we all have a responsibility to, in our sustainability practice, we have a responsibility to be better at being inclusive, to be better at speaking with people, create more dialogues and listen. And part of that is addressing power imbalance. And I often talk about power, because if we don't recognize that there are some people that hold power and some people that hold low levels of power, then we will be unable to tackle inequality. And my last slide is to talk about inequality, because inequality is rising across the world and it is hurting all of us. So Social Value International is a movement of people that want to tackle this inequality. And we want to do this through changing the way we account for value. And key to our approach to accounting for value is addressing power imbalance by listening and giving more of a voice to people who experience impact. So thank you for listening today for this short presentation. I hope this has inspired you, and please join us being part of the movement to change the way the world accounts for value. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Verna from GRI, and also Ben Carpenter from SVI. You share a lot of new things and how GRI and also SVI guide us to disclose how the company practices to support inclusiveness and diversity. I think GRI and SVI are the most powerful tools for us to be referred to, and how to guide us to put not into only the reporting, but also the practical way. Yeah. How the practical way can be implemented. Let's go to Rajesh and Anirban. These two men would like to also share how they encourage with the event, how they encourage with a lot of companies' policy, and also how they gather with the employees and with their sustainability stakeholders, and also all the people around them. Rajesh and Anirban work very hard to promote the gender diversity, inclusiveness, and also women equality in their way.
Dear attendees, I want to thank Dr. Chien for inviting me to share how CSRworks is contributing to inclusive sustainable development through our thought leadership programs. I also want to congratulate Dr. Chien and his incredible team for continuing with the Global Corporate Sustainability Forum despite all the constraints imposed by the pandemic. Let me introduce CSRworks very quickly. CSRworks is the oldest sustainability services firm in Singapore. We have 3 pillars of activities: advisory, training, and thought leadership. Our vision is better business, better world. And our mission is to empower organizations to build inclusive societies through purpose-driven business. Today, I want to share how we champion diversity and women empowerment through our different thought leadership programs. We have 3 flagship thought leadership programs: Asia Sustainability Reporting Awards, Asia Sustainability Reporting Summit, and Asia's Top Sustainability Superwomen. So let me start sharing each one of them one by one. Let me start with Asia's Top Sustainability Superwomen. So this program is to celebrate women leaders in sustainability in Asia by recognizing the accomplishments of exceptional women change makers. We started this program in 2018, and in the first year itself, we received 112 nominations from 19 countries. And our independent panel of judges selected 26 women to be honored for the first edition from 13 different countries. The next year, which was in 2019, we received 122 nominations from 20 countries, and the judging panel selected 27 women from 14 countries who were honored at the Asia Sustainability Reporting Summit that we organize every year. This year is the third year of Asia's Top Sustainability Superwomen, and we are very pleased that we are seeing very healthy nominations, and the results will be announced in December 2020. So we feel very privileged that we started this program, and through this program, we put some spotlight on Asia, some of the brightest, some of the foremost women leaders in sustainability who are really driving big change, making a big difference to secure our future and the future of this planet. So the next program that I want to share is Asia Sustainability Reporting Awards, which is the Oscars for sustainability reporting in Asia. Now, these awards are in their 6th year this year, and it's a nonprofit project that we started because we wanted to again recognize and honor those organizations which had started reporting on voluntary basis, and there was no regional recognition for them where they could come and get their work benchmarked and also network with their like-minded organizations who are leading in sustainability reporting. So this has been a very pleasant, very exciting 6-year journey for us. Every year we receive more than 450 entries from nearly 18, 19, or 20 countries. And we have an international independent judging panel which goes through all these entries to select the most deserving winners. Now, the awards have 19 categories. Each category aims to recognize participating organizations' contribution to economic, social, and environmental development. And each category supports at least one SDG. So that's our contribution to sustainable development. And I especially want to highlight one particular category, which is Asia's Best Diversity Reporting, which we added 3 years ago. And the purpose of adding this category was to highlight those companies, those organizations in Asia, which are doing a commendable job in promoting diversity at the workplace. Now, our results have been mixed. For example, last year, which was 2019 awards, the judging panel determined or decided that out of the 3 awards that we have, which is gold, silver, and bronze, only gold award will be given out because no entry was found suitable or up to the mark to receive our silver or bronze award. What that means for us is that there is a lot of work to be done in the area of workplace diversity. Through this forum, I want to encourage everyone who is watching me, everyone who is attending this fabulous summit that Dr. Chien organizes every year. I urge all of you to really consider diversity as part of your business strategy, as part of your human capital management, as part of your organizational strategy, organizational development strategy, as part of your management approach to attract, develop, and retain the best talent, and then report that through your sustainability report or integrated report, and then send your entry to us for this beautiful category that we have, Asia's Best Diversity Reporting. I also want to talk about Asia Sustainability Reporting Summit, which in my view is one of the most important events on the international sustainability calendar. And sustainability leaders from some of the largest global organizations, standard setters, benchmarkers, rating agencies, they look forward to this event. They look forward to coming to Singapore. And a lot of our regional friends, peers, leaders, colleagues, they travel to Singapore. And it's an amazing 2 or 3 days of sustainability dialogue that we host every year. So this year, because of the pandemic, it's going to be virtual. It's going to be on 9th December. And I hope all of you can also sign up and participate in that summit. Now, we have been using our Asia Sustainability Reporting Summit platform to advance women voices, to bring women leaders on stage to share their perspectives, to hear their perspectives, bringing equality in thought leadership. That's what we are trying to achieve. Every year we have 70 global and regional speakers who come to this summit and speak through different panels and workshops. And every year from the very first year, we have very successfully achieved our goal of having at least 50% speakers as women. In fact, every year, our women speakers proportion has been slightly more than 50%. Also, we made it a point that every year in this summit, there is a dedicated segment or session or a dialogue or workshop on diversity. And we bring together diversity experts, companies which are doing a phenomenal job in diversity and inclusion, or experts. We bring them together to have a dialogue so that we can learn from the leaders and experts on how we can integrate or embed diversity in our organizational policies. And I want to say that these workshops, these dedicated breakouts or sessions on diversity have always been oversubscribed. So we're very excited and we will continue with that work. Now with this, I really want to stop. And I again want to thank Dr. Chien for giving me this opportunity to share what we do. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I can't travel to Taipei. I would have loved to do that. And I'm really thankful to Dr. Chien for giving me the opportunity to share my message virtually through this recording. I thank you for watching this, and I look forward to your questions, and I'll be very happy to answer if there are any questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you for having me in this discussion on inclusiveness. The famous musician John Lennon had shared a vision. He said, "Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one." In these few lines, John Lennon referred to the diversity of nations, the diversity of religions, the diversity of people, and made it very clear that though inclusiveness could be a dream, it is not an impossible one. The conversation on inclusiveness does become a bigger priority when there is extreme diversity. Let me tell you a little about diversity in India. India is a nation with 1.4 billion people, 35% of whom live in urban areas and 65% in rural areas. Among them are more than 700 indigenous tribes living in a reasonably secluded life in remote, difficult to access areas. These 1.4 billion people speak 122 major languages. A major language being one that is spoken by more than 10,000 people. If you think a nation with 122 languages has enough linguistic diversity, consider this. There are almost 1,600 other smaller languages, and all these languages have more than 19,500 dialects. Contrast this with China, a larger country with more people than India, which has 8 major dialectical groups covering a total of 200 dialects. Though I speak 3 different languages, there are millions of people in my country who do not understand me at all. Speaking to them in Bengali, Hindi or English is no different from speaking to them in Spanish, French or Mandarin. The only thing that works is vigorous use of hand gestures and facial expressions. So even though India has 22 official languages, there is no national language. A large landmass with thousands of years of rich cultural history, India is the birthplace of 4 of the world's 12 major religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. And I am not even going into the different sects within each religion, because that will run into thousands. It may not surprise you that India is home to 94% of all the Hindus of the world. But you may not know that despite the formation of Pakistan in 1947 and the creation of Bangladesh in 1971, more Muslims choose to live in India than in any other Muslim country in the world except Indonesia. India is a nation where persecuted people of the world, like the Jews, the Zoroastrians, the Baha'is, have found shelter and a place to thrive. This cornucopia of linguistic and religious diversity lends itself to immense cultural diversity. There are 36 major cultural festivals in India, 2 of which, Durga Puja and Navratri, have just been celebrated in October. And the biggest of them all, Diwali, the festival of lights, is about to be celebrated this month. Many of these festivals celebrate the victory of good over evil. Some are prayers for a good crop, and some are thanksgiving for a bountiful harvest. Associated with these festivals are music, dance, and food. You can imagine the profusion and variety of each. If you tried to get a flavor of each one of them, it could take up your entire lifetime. While every one of 700 tribes have their own dance form, there are 8 recognized classical dance forms in the country. And you could be wishing Happy New Year to people in India during 6 different time clusters in a calendar year. This bewildering diversity is one of the reasons why Indians make very good migrants, assimilating into local communities and actively contributing to the economy and customs. You might wonder, what is it like growing up in a cauldron of incredibly diverse cultures? Let me tell you a little bit of my story. Growing up in a large cosmopolitan city in India can be magical. Think of a school where a class of 40 has children from more than 10 different parts of the country. They speak in different languages as their mother tongue, almost 7 or 8 in a class of 40, apart from speaking English, which is the medium of instruction. For me, that was normal. It was also normal to see festivals like Holi, the festival of color, Diwali, the festival of lights, Durga Puja, the celebration of victory of good over evil, and Eid, the festival of breaking the fast, being celebrated as community events with religion as a backdrop. While rituals connected to religion would not see cross-community participation, social, cultural, and culinary delights were enjoyed by all. I studied in a school run by Jesuit priests. While the Christian students studied the Bible, students of other faiths had no compulsion to do so. At the time our Christian friends went for Bible class, we studied moral science and got insight into spirituality, morality, and ethics, the underlying principles of humanism. Children of all faiths were permitted to pray in the school chapel, and many of us would make a stop there on the day of an examination, especially when we hadn't spent enough time with our books. One of the reasons my parents put me in this school was its emphasis on extracurricular activities. When we lined up to represent the class or the school in cricket, football, or hockey, inclusiveness came naturally. Diversity and differences did not cross anybody's minds. We were intent on playing together to win the contest, just as we would be intent on putting up a good performance when playing music in a band or acting in a play. The idea that we were different in any form was blissfully absent. The situation in the community I grew up in was no different. 4 or 5 decades ago, middle-class families would run out of sugar or oil or some other crucial ingredient at the most inappropriate time, and stepping across to a neighbor to borrow some was more the norm than an exception. Nobody ever thought about cultural or religious differences when seeking help or offering it. In 1975, television came to the city I grew up in. For many years, only a few households in the community had a television set. A common custom was to visit folks who had a television to see popular programs, the most popular being a program called Chitrahar, in which a collection of songs from movies would be screened. The annual international cricket match held in the city, sometime in the winter, would always draw enough people to fill the room the television was in. I don't remember a single instance of people holding themselves back or their children from joining this merrymaking for any reason. A lot of this is unthinkable today. But India is a very large country. Whatever you say of India, the opposite is also true. So even as I share my experience of an inclusive upbringing, it would be unfair to say that this was the only truth in India. I shared some of my experiences with you because it gives us a glimpse into things that break barriers, prevent the continuous search for people like us, and thus enable inclusiveness. Let us talk about some of the things that enable inclusiveness. Even the most fractious of communities come together as one whenever there is a threat to the community. If a hurricane or cyclone is approaching, the entire town or village works as one to prevent casualty and damage. Even political parties who are constantly fighting with each other become united if there is a threat to the security of the nation. Of course, they also come together to raise their own salaries and allowances, but we are not talking about that now. The one institution that is a role model for inclusiveness in any country is the armed forces. One for all and all for one is the ethos that runs through every single person in the unit. Right now, we are seeing unprecedented cooperation in trying to find a cure for COVID, just as we have seen communities come together to fight polio and smallpox in the past. Two of the most popular social programs in India in the last few years have been the drive to eliminate open defecation and the effort to enable adoption of liquefied petroleum gas as a cooking fuel in place of biomass in Indian villages. These are all common problems that society needed to solve, and with good leadership, we were able to do that in an inclusive manner. But threats and problems are not the only things that bring people together and make them inclusive. Probably the most powerful factor that enables inclusiveness is the search for livelihood. When you are trying to make a living, the community or class of your employer, your colleague, or your customer is of no importance, unless you need special favors. All that matters is that you are in an atmosphere that enables you to perform and earn a living. The pursuit of common passions such as sports, music, theatre, preservation of nature also bring people together. What I experienced in school occurs on a much larger stage. The regional or religious affiliation of the captain of the Indian cricket team is never even a consideration. The only consideration is the person's ability to lead a diverse group of people with a common passion towards a common goal. When we go to see a film, we don't ask about the nationality of the actors, their sexual orientation, or their social affiliation. We are only interested in the story they are sharing with us and the intensity with which they do so. Resource scarcity can bring people together too. I've told you about borrowing sugar from the neighbor and watching television in someone else's house. Let me tell you about an evening in my house in the early part of my career. I shared an apartment with a friend in the capital city of Delhi. The summer season is very dry and very hot in Delhi. We were the owners of a prized possession, a room cooler, and had a large living room with very little furniture in it. One evening, around midnight, there was a power outage in the area, but our block of apartments continued to have power. Within half an hour, our apartment was filled with young men and women who lived in the area and did not have power in their own apartments. While most were friends of ours, some were brought along by our friends. Everyone was happy to spread a sheet on the floor and lie down in the comfort of the cool air from the room cooler. No questions were necessary about their ethnicity, nationality, or anything. When I look back, there were people from 2 nations, spoke at least 4 different languages, and came from more than 6 different regions in that room, none of which mattered. At this time, you may be thinking that resource scarcity can also lead to dog-eat-dog, each one to his own behavior. This can happen too, and we will talk about that in a minute. But let's reflect on when resource scarcity can create inclusiveness. It actually depends on our mentality and the worldview we have. If we are comfortable in ourselves, believe we have enough, appreciate the situation someone else is in, and have a genuine interest in driving positive change, we will, despite resource scarcity, reach out and be inclusive. Stephen Covey talks about this personal state and way of thinking as experiencing private victory and having an abundance mentality. So as we have discussed, common threats to existence, common problems, search for livelihood, common passions, and an abundance mentality when resources are scarce can enable inclusiveness. Just as Stephen Covey talked about abundance mentality, he also talked about scarcity mentality. This is the mentality that prevents people and communities from practicing empathy and being generous. At an individual level, feelings of inadequacy or low self-esteem can make a person hesitant to reach out and be inclusive. At the opposite end of the esteem spectrum, feelings of supremacy also lead to exclusionary and discriminatory behavior, some of which is in the news these days. Fear of persecution, fear of exclusion, or fear of losing identity, however real, are other mental constructs that can lead to individuals and communities doubling down on who they are and staying within their own mental ghetto. These constructs usually result in a vicious cycle, and it is very difficult to get a person or community that has this mental frame to look at the world through a different, more inclusive lens. Divide and rule has been a common tool used by rulers, especially conquerors of the past, to subjugate the people of a region. It often serves their interest to keep the people fighting. Modern politicians, in their narrow self-interest, find it expedient to use this method to keep themselves in power. Governments and politicians are sometimes accused of keeping people unnecessarily dependent on them so that the fruits of development are not shared equally. It takes a large-hearted leader to go above these considerations when governing a nation. Mental constructs and fear of losing out apart, simple physical isolation can prevent intermingling and therefore lead to exclusion from the mainstream. This is one reason why India still has people from remote indigenous tribes who are yet to benefit fully from the development dividend that the country is experiencing. While development does blunt the cultural identity of tribes, the safety and comfort of a better life are trade-offs that tribes have made all over the world whenever given the option. Development can be a double-edged sword. One of the unintended consequences of market-driven development is the unequal division of value created among communities. This leads to the increase of economic disparity between different classes of society and, beyond a point, creates severe class differentiation among people. The search for a more equitable model of development continues. Perhaps the Scandinavian countries are further along the path of finding a balance between value creation and value distribution more than other parts of the world. As we can see, mental constructs like scarcity mentality, low self-esteem, fear of persecution, exclusion, and loss of identity, narrow self-interest, physical isolation, and unequal development can lead to exclusionary tendencies and situations. The cry for inclusiveness has always been there. It has become louder now, probably because inequity has grown sharply since the financial meltdown in 2008, and also because the threat of climate change-related disasters affecting the poor more than others is becoming real. The desire for a just transition has been voiced by stakeholders from all over the world. The rationale for inclusiveness is simple and clear. Inclusiveness leads to social harmony and peace. This creates a stable environment for investments to flow and for development to occur. Together with the demographic dividend of more people in the working age, it leads to accelerated growth of the economy, leads people out of poverty, and improves the Human Development Index. Many nations have experienced this since the Second World War. Entrepreneurs, administrators, cultural ambassadors have all grown together in this kind of an environment. This insight is embedded in the way the Prime Minister of India has articulated the goal for his government. He has promised Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, which means together for everyone's growth with everyone's trust. In an environment as diverse as India, corporations have no choice but to be inclusive if they want to grow. There is immense diversity among customers and customer preferences. Only on rare occasions can a consumer product company sell the same product everywhere in the country without any customization. Therefore, there are many products that are popular within a state or a region but are not popular elsewhere. Companies are critically dependent on talent. There is great diversity in the workforce, as is to be expected. So working conditions must accommodate the diversity. However, accommodating diversity is not enough. An ecosystem must be created for everyone to thrive. Verna Myers, Vice President Inclusion Strategy at Netflix, summed it up very well. She said, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance." India's economy is growing rapidly. For decades, unemployment, or rather disguised employment, has been very large. This has prevented the assimilation of differently abled persons into the workforce. As the economy grows, opportunities are opening up for differently abled persons and organizations to work together. While many organizations have taken steps in this direction, the most remarkable has been Lemon Tree Hotels, a hospitality company. Lemon Tree Hotels have mapped out assignments for people given the special ability they possess and created a model that helps the able-bodied and the differently abled to work together effectively. While more than 20% of their workforce are differently abled, the team delivers top-class guest satisfaction. While this is one shining example in the Indian corporate landscape, there are many more that are following this path, including companies like Tech Mahindra and Mahindra Holidays and Resorts. The Mahindra Group is known to be an equal opportunity employer. The 16-member leadership team of this $20 billion group has people from at least 12 different regions, including one from its largest overseas business. It is only because I was preparing for this presentation that I looked it up. Nobody in the business even realizes the diversity that exists in the leadership team, because diversity and inclusiveness is the ethos of the company, and you don't do it as a special new initiative. Maybe this is one of the reasons why Mahindra has just been listed as number 17 on a list of the world's most sustainably managed companies by the Wall Street Journal, one of 6 Asian companies in the top 20 and the highest ranked Indian company. This is a study that covered 5,500 companies from around the world. The business case for inclusiveness is clear. John Lennon's dream is not a pipe dream. Common threats to existence, common problems, search for livelihood, common passions, and an abundance mentality when resources are scarce enable inclusiveness. Mental constructs like scarcity mentality, low self-esteem, fear of persecution, exclusion and loss of identity, narrow self-interest, physical isolation, and unequal development can lead to exclusionary situations. The search for growth drives corporations to be inclusive in incredibly diverse countries like India. And for companies that work around the world, inclusion, working in diversity, is something that they have to do every day. More than 3,000 years ago, wise people of the land we now call India said, "Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam." The whole world is one family. It is time to live this ethos in letter and spirit. Thank you very much once again for having me to speak to you in this session on the topic of inclusiveness.
Thank you very much for all the sharings. If I may ask one question for Verna. I understand that GRI put a lot of indicators in women's, but sometimes it's quite difficult to put it in the report since different kind of company, different type of company also have different way to treat them, especially in the way of their working employment. For example, in mining industry, I understand that a lot of men working in mining, but not in women, even though some of the mining industry now trying to put some women and giving equality so they can work in the mining industry. What do you think to see this kind of phenomena, how the company encourage women to select and to try some of the job that sometimes people think only men can do? So thank you so much, Rajesh, for all your sharings. If I can ask you, you already awarded a lot of Asia's top sustainability superwomen. Do you also think that these superwomen work their part to promote the equality? How do you see that? How do you see their work to support this woman diversity? And also for Anirban, thank you for your great presentations. Since I understand that India, similar like Indonesia, we have a very strong culture that actually women have to stay at home. Or maybe women have to work only a little things compared to men's. How do you encourage and maybe you convince the family that actually women also have the equality to work and also to say that they have a very good competence? Okay, thank you so much for the great presentations. I think all of us are really enjoy your presentations. And let me conclude what you already talked about, and especially your spirits to support the gender equality, the diversity, and also ensuring inclusiveness and equality for every person everywhere. Relating to leaving no one behind, I can say that ensuring inclusiveness, equality, and equity means approaching to sustainable development goals in an integrated manner. The realization that the set of goals under review this year is not be possible if progress across the other sustainable development goals is not also ensured. So, inclusiveness and equality are very important. How we can achieve the equal and how we can achieve no one left behind. By all these things, I think the way forward is let's do. Act now. No further delay, but let's do it now. Thank you.